The morning of my wedding, I was standing in front of a mirror in a white dress when my maid of honor walked in and said, "Your sister is outside. She's asking to come in." I hadn't spoken to my sister in 3 years. Not since the day I found out she had been living as me. Not since the day I discovered she had opened 7 credit cards in my name, taken out 2 personal loans, destroyed my credit score, and told every single person in our hometown that she was me. I looked at my reflection in that mirror for a long time. And then I said, "Let her in." Because I had waited 3 years for this moment. And I wanted her to see exactly what she had tried to destroy. I want to tell you the whole story. Because if I just tell you the ending, you won't understand how we got there. You won't understand what it cost me. And you won't understand why what happened next was the most satisfying moment of my entire life. So let me go back to the beginning. My name is Rachel. I'm the older of 2 daughters. My sister's name is Kara, and she is 18 months younger than me. Growing up, people always said we looked alike. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same height. Strangers used to think we were twins. I used to think that was a beautiful thing. I had no idea it would one day become a weapon she used against me. Our childhood was normal on the surface. Mom and dad, small house in a small town, Catholic school on Sundays, dinner together most nights. But underneath that normal surface, there was a current that ran through everything in our family, and that current had a name, and that name was Kara. My sister was the favorite. I know every kid thinks that about their sibling, but I am not saying it the way a jealous child says it. I am saying it the way a grown woman who has had years of therapy says it. Kara was the favorite in a way that was documented and deliberate and, looking back, genuinely damaging to both of us. When Kara failed a class, my parents hired a tutor and told her it was the teacher's fault. When I failed a class, I was grounded for a month. When Kara wrecked the car at 17, my father said boys would always distract a pretty girl and replace the car within the week. When I got a parking ticket at 19, I paid it myself, and my mother brought it up for the next 2 years as evidence of my irresponsibility. I could give you 100 examples. I won't, because that's not the story. The story is what happened when we became adults, and Kara's sense of entitlement followed her out of our parents' house and into the real world, and the real world, unlike our parents, did not bend itself around her. Kara struggled after high school. She started college and dropped out after 1 semester. She got a job and lost it within 3 months. She moved in with a boyfriend. The boyfriend left. She moved back home. This cycle repeated itself several times over her early 20s while I, across the state, was quietly building a life. I had gotten a degree in accounting. I had a stable job at a mid-sized firm. I had an apartment I loved, a small savings account, a decent credit score I had built carefully over years of paying every bill on time. I was not rich. I was not spectacular. But I was stable, and I had built that stability myself, with no help from anyone. I was proud of that. I should have protected it better. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday afternoon in October, about 4 years ago. I was at work when I got a call from a bank I had never opened an account with. The woman on the phone asked me to verify my address, and she said an address I had never lived at. I told her that wasn't my address. She asked me to verify my social security number. It matched mine. She told me there was a credit card in my name that was 60 days past due. I felt cold all over. I told her I had never opened that account. She said she would flag it and transfer me to the fraud department. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone. By the end of those 2 hours, I had learned that there were not 1 but 3 credit cards open in my name that I had never applied for. 2 of them were maxed out. 1 of them had a balance of $9,000. I filed a fraud report. I put a freeze on my credit. I filed a police report, which felt strange and dramatic and necessary all at the same time. The detective I spoke to was kind but honest. He told me identity theft cases were difficult to prosecute. He told me to document everything. I documented everything, but I still didn't know who had done it. For the next several weeks, I tried to figure it out the way any logical person would. I went through my mail, looking for anything suspicious. I checked my accounts. I changed every password I had. I assumed it was a stranger, some faceless criminal who had gotten hold of my information through a data breach or a skimming device or any of the 1,000 other ways these things happen. It never once occurred to me that it was my sister. That is the part that still gets me. Even now, that I spent weeks looking for a stranger when the answer was someone who had sat across from me at every Christmas dinner for my entire life. The moment I found out the truth came about 6 weeks after that first phone call, and it came from the most unexpected place. I ran into an old friend from high school at a grocery store. Her name was Melissa, and we had been close in our teens but had drifted apart the way people do. She hugged me warmly, asked how I was doing, and then said something that stopped me completely. "Hey, I actually saw your sister last month pretending to be you," which was so weird. Like, she introduced herself as Rachel to these people at a party. I figured it was a joke, but it was kind of a long joke, you know? I stared at her. She introduced herself as Rachel? Melissa's face changed. She realized in real time that this was not something I already knew about. She started to backtrack, saying maybe she had misheard. Maybe it was a bit, but I stopped her and asked her to tell me everything she remembered. And she did. Kara had been at a party in our hometown 6 weeks earlier. She had introduced herself to multiple people as Rachel. She had told them she worked in accounting. She had told them the name of my firm. She had given them my phone number. I drove home from that grocery store in a state I can only describe as a very quiet, very controlled kind of fury. The kind of anger that doesn't make you scream. The kind that makes you very, very still. I called my mother. I told her what Melissa had said. My mother was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that told me everything I needed to know about how deep this went. She said, "Rachel, Kara has been going through a hard time. You know how she is. She probably just wanted people to take her seriously for once." I said, "Mom, she used my name. She used my social security number. There are credit cards open in my name that I didn't open." Another silence. And then my mother said, "Are you sure it was her? Because that seems like a very serious accusation." I hung up. I want to be very clear about what that moment felt like. It was not a surprise, exactly. I had spent my whole life watching my parents protect Kara from consequences. But there is a difference between watching your parents excuse your sister for being late to dinner and watching them hesitate when you tell them she may have committed federal fraud in your name. That difference lands on you like something physical. I did not call Kara immediately. I know that might seem strange, but I had learned enough in my life to know that confronting Kara directly would accomplish nothing except giving her time to prepare a defense and probably a counteraccusation. So instead, I spent the next 3 weeks doing something she never expected. I gathered evidence. I called the banks. I requested documentation on every fraudulent account. I worked with the fraud investigators and gave them Kara's name and address. I hired a lawyer for a consultation, which cost me money I didn't have but which I put on a credit card and told myself was worth it. My lawyer told me that if the evidence connected Kara to the accounts, I had a strong case both civilly and criminally. I pulled my full credit report. 7 accounts. 7. 4 credit cards, 2 personal loans, and a store account at a furniture store in the town where Kara lived. The total debt she had run up in my name was just over $41,000. $41,000. I sat with that number for a long time. She had opened the first account 2 years before I even noticed anything wrong, which meant she had been doing this for at least 2 years before that phone call, probably longer. She had been careful, spacing out the applications, keeping some of the balances just low enough not to trigger immediate alerts. She had done this deliberately and systematically over years. This was not impulsive. This was not a mistake. This was a plan. And the more I dug, the worse it got. Because the credit cards and loans were only part of it. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Kara had been telling people in our hometown for years that she was me. Not just using my name at a party. Actually, genuinely presenting herself as Rachel who works in accounting, Rachel who lives across the state, Rachel who is so busy and successful. She had built an entire alternate persona using my identity. She told people I had said things I never said. She told people stories about my life that never happened. She had even, on at least 2 occasions, called businesses and represented herself as me to get information or resolve disputes. She had been living inside my name like it was a coat she had borrowed without asking. I cannot fully explain to you what it feels like to find this out about someone you grew up with. Someone who knows your childhood, your embarrassing stories, your family history. Someone whose face looks like yours. It is a violation that goes deeper than the financial damage, as serious as that damage was. It is the feeling of having your own identity used against you by someone who should have been protecting you. I cried exactly once about it. One night, alone in my apartment, I let myself feel the full weight of it. And then I stopped crying and went back to building my case. The investigators connected Kara to 4 of the 7 accounts with direct evidence: an IP address, a phone number registered in her name, a signature that didn't quite match mine on a loan document. The other 3 were strongly circumstantial. My lawyer said it was enough to move forward. I had 2 choices. I could go fully criminal, press charges, let the process play out, and accept that it would be slow and public and would destroy what little remained of my family relationships. Or I could pursue it civilly and use the criminal evidence as leverage. I chose a combination. I authorized the fraud investigators to refer the case to the district attorney. And then, before any of that machinery started moving, I called Kara myself. I want to describe this phone call accurately because it was one of the strangest conversations of my life. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was perfectly normal, casual, like we talked every week. "Hey, Rach." "Kara," I said. "I know what you've been doing." A pause. Very brief. "I don't know what you mean." "7 accounts," I said. $41,000. 2 years minimum, probably 3. I have the documentation. I have investigators who have connected 4 of the accounts to you directly. And I have a lawyer. Silence. Then, and I want you to understand how completely this stunned me, she started to cry. Not the cry of someone caught and ashamed. The cry of someone performing victimhood. I had heard that cry my entire life. I knew exactly what it was. "Rachel, I was desperate. I lost my job and I had no money and I didn't know what to do, and I just needed to get through a hard time, and I was going to pay it all back. I swear I was going to pay it all back." "With what money?" I said. "You've never paid back anything in your life. That's not fair." "Kara." My voice was very calm. I was proud of how calm it was. "The district attorney is going to receive this referral within the week. What happens after that is not in my control. But I want you to understand that I know everything. And I want you to think very carefully about whether you want to call Mom and Dad and tell them the truth before they hear it from someone else." I hung up. She called back 4 times. I didn't answer. She called my mother. I know this because my mother called me 45 minutes later, crying, telling me I was tearing the family apart, asking me to think about what I was doing to Kara. I said, "Mom, your daughter committed identity fraud against me for 3 years. I am not tearing the family apart. She did that before I knew anything about it." And I hung up. My father called the next day. His tone was different from my mother's. He was not crying. He was angry. He said I was being vindictive. He said Kara had made mistakes, but I was making it worse. He said family handled things internally. I said, "Dad, this is internal. I am handling it. The way it gets handled is through the legal system because that is what she did." He told me he was disappointed in me. That was the last time I spoke to my father for 14 months. Before I keep going, wherever you're watching this right now, drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Would you have pressed charges against your own sister? Because what comes next is something I never saw coming. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. This story has a long way to go, and trust me, the ending is worth every second. The legal process moved the way legal processes do, which is slowly and without drama and with a great deal of paperwork. Kara was eventually charged with identity theft and fraud. Because she had no prior record, and because she agreed to a plea arrangement that included full restitution, she did not go to prison. She received probation, community service, and a repayment plan. The repayment plan was almost funny. $41,000, to be repaid at a rate that would take her 17 years. My lawyer told me to take it and be glad. That civil judgment collection was a nightmare, and this at least had teeth behind it. I took it. Getting my financial life back took 2 full years. 2 years of disputes and letters and phone calls and credit bureau corrections. 2 years of explaining to potential landlords and lenders why there were derogatory marks on my record that weren't mine. 2 years of carrying the administrative weight of someone else's crimes. During those 2 years, I met Daniel. I know this might sound like a sudden turn, but it isn't really. Because Daniel is the reason the ending of the story is what it is. And because meeting him during the hardest stretch of my adult life taught me something about myself that I needed to know. I met him at a work event. He was a client of the firm, not mine directly, but we ended up at the same table at a dinner and talked for 3 hours, and he asked for my number before the night was over. I almost said no. I was exhausted and guarded, and carrying more than anyone knew. But something about him made me say yes. I told him everything on our 4th date. All of it. Kara, the fraud, the court case, the family rupture. I laid it out completely, because I had decided after everything that happened that I was done managing what people knew about me. I was done curating my story to protect other people's comfort. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "That is the most exhausting thing I have ever heard. Are you okay?" I said, "I'm getting there." He said, "Okay, then let's get there together." We were together for 2 years before he proposed. He proposed in my apartment, the same apartment I had been in when all of this started, the apartment that had seen me at my lowest, and he got down on one knee in the kitchen, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. We started planning the wedding. My family situation at that point was complicated. My father and I had slowly, cautiously resumed contact after about a year of silence. Our relationship was civil but thin, like a page that had been crumpled and smoothed out but still showed all the fold lines. My mother and I spoke occasionally. She had never fully acknowledged what Kara had done. She had never said the words, "What your sister did to you is wrong." Not once. Kara and I had not spoken since that phone call. I did not invite Kara to the wedding. I want to be very clear about that. I made that decision carefully and without drama. I simply did not send her an invitation. I told my parents that Kara was not invited and why, and that I expected them to respect that boundary if they wanted to be part of the day. My father agreed, stiffly. My mother cried and said it broke her heart, but she would come. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The wedding was on a Saturday in June. We had a venue about 40 minutes outside the city, a renovated old farmhouse with big windows and a garden that was full of flowers. It was exactly what I had wanted. I was happy in a way that felt like it had been earned, which maybe made it taste a little sweeter than happiness is supposed to. I was in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids at 9 in the morning when my maid of honor, Jen, came in with a look on her face I had never seen before. She closed the door. She said, "Okay. I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm." I said, "What?" She said, "Kara is outside. In the parking lot. She's not in the venue. She didn't get past the door, but she's in the parking lot, and she's asking if she can come in and speak to you." The room got very quiet. My bridesmaids looked at me. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The white dress. The flowers in my hair. Everything I had rebuilt. Standing right there, looking back at me. I thought about the morning I got that first phone call from the bank. I thought about $41,000. I thought about my mother saying, "Are you sure it was her?" I thought about my father saying, "I'm disappointed in you." I thought about 2 years of paperwork and disputes and phone calls, and explaining myself to strangers because of what my sister had done. And then I thought about Daniel in the next room, probably nervous, probably straightening his tie for the 4th time. I said, "Let her in." Jen stared at me. "Rachel." "Let her in," I said again. "Bring her to the bridal suite. But I want you and the girls to stay." Jen went to get her. My bridesmaids looked at me with a mix of alarm and fierce loyalty that I will never forget. One of them, my friend Priya, quietly moved to stand slightly behind me and to the left, like a guard who was pretending not to be a guard. The door opened, and Kara walked in. She looked different, smaller, somehow, than I remember her. She had always been the kind of person who took up space, who was louder than the room required, who made you aware of her presence immediately. But the woman who walked into my bridal suite was none of those things. She looked tired. She was wearing a plain dress, no makeup, her hair pulled back. She looked like someone who had not slept well in a long time. She looked at me in the wedding dress, and something moved across her face that I could not name. I said, "You have 5 minutes, and I want you to know that whatever you came to say, it will not change today. Today is happening regardless." She nodded. She said, "I know. I'm not here to stop anything. She stopped. Started again. "I needed to see you. I needed to say it to your face." I waited. She said, "I'm sorry, Rachel. I know that doesn't fix it. I know sorry doesn't mean anything after what I did. But I have been carrying this for 3 years, and I needed you to hear me say it. What I did was wrong. It was completely, unforgivably wrong. I told myself 100 different stories about why it was okay, and none of them were true, and I knew it the whole time. I knew it, and I did it anyway." Silence. "You knew it," I said. "Yes." "You knew it for 3 years." "Yes." "And you kept going." She didn't look away. I'll give her that. Whatever else she was, she didn't look away. "Yes," she said. "I kept going. Because every time I told myself I would stop, something else would go wrong in my life, and I would think, just one more time, just to get through this, and I couldn't stop." That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I'm just trying to tell you the truth. Maybe for the first time in my life. The room was very quiet. I had thought about this moment many times. I had imagined what I would feel. I had imagined anger, or satisfaction, or grief, or some combination of all three. I had not imagined what I actually felt, which was something very close to pity. Not the soft kind. Not the kind that forgives. The kind that looks at someone and sees exactly how they got to where they are, and feels sad about it in a distant way, the way you feel sad about a news story that doesn't affect you personally. I said, "Kara, I hear you, and I want you to understand something. I am not going to tell you it's okay. It is not okay. What you did changed the course of my life in ways you will never fully understand. 2 years of my life went to fixing what you broke. My relationship with Dad, which I may never fully get back. The way I had to explain myself to strangers because of your choices. None of that is okay, and none of it is forgiven." She nodded. Her eyes were wet. "But I am not going to carry you today," I said. "I have spent 3 years carrying what you did. Today I'm putting it down. Not for you. For me. So you can say what you came to say, and you can leave. And I'm going to walk down that aisle and marry the man I love, and I'm going to have the most beautiful day of my life. And you are not going to be a part of it. But I'm also not going to let you ruin it by standing in a parking lot being a dark cloud on the edge of my happiness." She was crying quietly now. "You deserve all of this," she said. "You always did." I said, "I know. That sounds cold. Maybe it was. But after everything, I was done performing modesty about what I had built. I had earned the right to know my own worth." I looked at Jen. "Can you make sure she gets to her car safely?" Jen stepped forward without hesitation. I turned back to the mirror. Behind me, I heard Kara say, very quietly, "You look beautiful, Rachel." I did not respond. I heard the door close. I stood there for a moment, looking at myself. And then Priya put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You okay?" I took a breath. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." The wedding was everything I had wanted it to be. The garden was full of June light. Daniel cried when I walked down the aisle, which I had predicted, and I cried too, which I had not. My father walked me down the aisle, and he held my arm a little tighter than he needed to, and I let him because that tightness was its own kind of apology, and I decided it was enough. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. Happy tears, I think. Or, at least mostly. At the reception during dinner, Daniel leaned over and asked, quietly, if I was okay. I had told him about Kara showing up. He had offered to go deal with it himself. I had said no, that this was mine to handle. I told him I was okay. He said, she didn't ruin it. I said, no, she really didn't. He said, you know why? I said, why? He said, because she doesn't have that power anymore. You took it back. I looked at him across the dinner table, and I thought about the version of me from 4 years ago, sitting alone in her apartment after hours on the phone with fraud investigators, feeling like something essential had been taken from her. That woman had fought her way back from $41,000 of someone else's debt. She had spent 2 years correcting a record that was never hers to correct. She had lost her family for a year and rebuilt those relationships on her own terms. She had met a man who heard the whole ugly story and said, "Let's get there together." And she had stood in a wedding dress and told her sister, calmly and completely, exactly what the truth was. Without screaming, without collapsing, without letting the past pull her backward. I looked around the room. The flowers, the light, the people who loved us. Kara did not get to be there. Not because I was punishing her, but because some things you don't get to witness when you've spent 3 years trying to be someone else. She had spent 3 years trying to be me. And she had missed in that time the most important thing about my life. That I had built it myself. That it was mine. That no one, not even someone who shared my face and my blood and my childhood, could take that from me. The restitution payments still come. Every month like clockwork, because the court order has teeth and Kara has learned, finally, that some consequences cannot be managed away. It will take her 17 years to pay it back. I don't wait for the money. I don't need it the way I once did. But every time it comes, it is a small, quiet reminder that the truth won out. My relationship with my parents is what it is. My father and I are careful with each other. There is love there, real love, but it sits inside a structure of understanding that some things were said and done that cannot be unsaid or undone. My mother has never said, "What Kara did to you is wrong." I have stopped waiting for her to say it. That waiting was its own kind of debt, and I paid it off. Kara is still in her hometown. She works at a retail job. She has stayed out of trouble, as far as I know. We do not speak. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her anything really, which sounds cold but is actually the healthiest thing I have ever felt about her. Indifference is not cruelty. Sometimes it is just the natural result of someone proving, over and over, who they really are. I think about that phone call sometimes. The first one from the bank I had never heard of, asking me to verify an address I had never lived at. I think about how ordinary that Tuesday afternoon was before that call. How I was just a woman at her desk at work, not knowing that somewhere across the state, her sister was living inside her name. I think about how long it took me to get back to ordinary. And then I think about standing in that bridal suite in a white dress, and I think about the word Kara used. Beautiful. You look beautiful, Rachel. And the thing is, I know she meant it. I know she saw me standing there and everything I had built, and everything I had survived, and everything I had refused to let her take from me. And I know she meant every word of it. That's the part that stays with me. Not as pain. Just as the truth of what happened. I was beautiful. I am. And it took losing almost everything to understand that no one can steal that from you. Not even someone who tried for 3 years. And that's the whole story. From a phone call she almost didn't answer, to standing in a wedding dress, to finally putting it all down. If this hit you somewhere real, leave a comment. Tell me whose side you were on. Tell me if you've ever had someone betray you the way Kara betrayed Rachel. Would you have let her in that morning? I read every single comment. Every one. And if you're new here, welcome. Subscribe. Because every week I bring you stories like this one. Real people. Real pain. Real moments where the truth finally wins. I'll see you in the next one.